Unaware she is daughter of a secret trillionaire who died recently. Husband lets mistress humiliate his wife and their twins at a Christmas party until he sees the guest list. He didn't just fail to defend her. He stood there and watched. At a glowing Christmas party he'd bragged about for weeks, in front of clients, strangers, and a woman who was not his wife, Mark Carter let the mother of his children be treated like she was nothing. While the music played and the glasses shimmered, his mistress slid into the seat beside him, and his wife Evelyn was pushed to the back of the room, standing with their two 6-year-old twins pressed against her side. It wasn't one insult. It was layer after layer. The mistress laughed at Evelyn's simple dress. She told the staff to move the children because they were in the way. She raised a glass and joked that some people didn't belong everywhere they were invited. Mark heard it all. He didn't stop her. He didn't even look at Evelyn. To everyone in that room, Evelyn was just a quiet wife from nowhere important, wearing a plain gold necklace and holding her kids' hands a little too tightly. No one there knew that only days earlier she'd finally listened to a voicemail from an unknown number about a man she'd never met, who had died recently. A man whose shadow touched far more in that room than anyone guessed. People online would later argue about how rich he really was, whispering that, if you added everything he controlled, he'd been the world's first secret trillionaire. No public list had ever used that word, but his money had reached quietly into companies, foundations, and even this very party. What they didn't see was the paper Evelyn was holding, the printed guest list she had picked up without thinking. They didn't see her eyes freeze when she recognized a single name on it. They didn't see the moment her heartbreak stopped shaking and started calculating. This isn't just a story about a cruel Christmas party. It's about what happens when a man lets another woman humiliate the wife he thinks is powerless, without realizing the people really watching that night were not watching him at all. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like standing in that room and pretending you didn't see what they did to Evelyn. When you click that button, you stand with every quiet soul who was mocked, humiliated, and still chose to rise. Please, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. No one noticed Evelyn Carter when she stood at the edge of a room, and that was exactly how she had learned to survive. At 32, Evelyn had perfected the art of being unseen. Not because she was weak, but because life had taught her that attention often came with a price. She moved quietly, spoke carefully, and lived with intention. She didn't wear expensive clothes. She didn't chase trends. She didn't complain. Everything about her suggested someone ordinary, almost forgettable. She wasn't poor. But she lived modestly by choice. That morning she sat on the living room floor, carefully stitching a loose button back onto a small winter coat. The coat belonged to her son, Noah, one of her 6-year-old twins. His sister, Lily, sat beside him, legs crossed, watching her mother with serious focus. Say it again, Evelyn said softly, tying off the thread. Thank you, Noah said. And again, she reminded him. Thank you. Twice, Lily added proudly. Evelyn smiled. Teaching manners wasn't about politeness to her. It was about gratitude, about humility, about remembering that nothing comfort, love, or safety was ever guaranteed. She had learned that lesson early. Evelyn was raised by her mother alone. No stories of fairy tale love, no framed wedding photos, just a small apartment, secondhand furniture, and a woman who worked long hours but never complained. Her mother never spoke badly about the man who wasn't there. She only ever said one thing about him. If your father loved you, her mother would say while folding laundry, he did it from far away. As a child, Evelyn didn't understand what that meant. As an adult, she understood it meant distance chosen, intentional, painful distance. Once a year, without fail, an envelope arrived in the mail. Thick, cream-colored, no return address. Her mother always took it quietly and put it away without opening it in front of Evelyn. There was never excitement, never fear, just silence. Evelyn learned not to ask. Sometimes, though, she caught small details. A bank receipt left under a newspaper, a charity brochure tucked beside the envelope. Her mother never explained, but she always paid the rent on time that month. Some things her mother believed were safer, unexplained. The clearest memory Evelyn had of her father wasn't a face. It was a moment. Her high school graduation. While everyone else took photos and hugged relatives, Evelyn noticed a man standing across the street, older, well-dressed, but not flashy. He didn't wave. He didn't come closer. He simply stood there, watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Regret, maybe. Pride. Loss. Her mother stiffened beside her when she saw him, her hand tightening slightly on Evelyn's shoulder. "Come on," her mother had said gently, steering her toward the group. "They're calling your name for photos." When Evelyn looked back, the man was gone. Years later, she would realize that was the closest he ever allowed himself to come. Back in the present, Evelyn slipped on her simple gold necklace before standing up. The chain was old and heavier than it looked. It didn't match her lifestyle at all. It had belonged to her mother, and before that, someone else. Evelyn never took it off, not even when money was tight. It was the one thing she owned that felt significant. She gathered her twins and helped them into their shoes. Through the open doorway, she could hear her husband, Mark Carter, speaking sharply on the phone. Mark was 35, confident, ambitious, and increasingly impatient with things that didn't serve him. He was good at appearing charming in public. At home, he was distant, dismissive. "Don't argue with me," Mark said into the phone, pacing. "I already said no. Sponsors want numbers, not excuses." Evelyn paused. She didn't interrupt. She never did. Mark hung up and glanced at her, eyes scanning her clothes, the mended coat, the quiet children. His jaw tightened slightly, not anger, but something colder, disapproval. "You didn't have to fix that," he said flatly. "We could have bought a new one. I told you my bonus cleared." Evelyn nodded. "It still works. And they like this one." Mark didn't respond. He grabbed his keys and work bag and headed for the door. "You'll make dinner?" he asked, already half turned away. "Yes," she said. He left without another word. The silence he left behind was heavier than noise. Evelyn knelt again to help Lily tie her shoe, pushing away the familiar ache in her chest. She had learned long ago not to demand warmth from people who didn't know how to give it. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep, Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She stared at the screen. Her heart skipped not from fear, but from something deeper. Memory. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, clear as if she were standing beside her. "If anything ever happens," her mother had whispered once, during a rare moment of vulnerability. "Answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. The right people won't use your name in public." Evelyn's thumb hovered over the screen. The call stopped. A missed call notification appeared. She hesitated only a second. Then, exhausted, she silenced the phone and placed it face down on the counter. Whatever it was, she told herself, it could wait until morning. She had learned to delay questions, learned to survive without answers, but as she turned off the kitchen light, she didn't notice the small voicemail icon blinking softly on the dark screen. And she didn't know that the next time that phone rang, everything she believed about her life, her marriage, her worth, her past, would begin to crack open. Some doors don't knock twice. They call and call until you finally pick up. The first time Mark Carter raised his voice at Evelyn, it wasn't in anger, it was in laughter. "You're different," he had said, leaning back in his chair, studying her like a rare find. "Most women want more. You don't." At the time, Evelyn had taken it as a compliment. Now, standing in the hallway with her twins clinging to her legs, she watched Mark adjust his jacket in the mirror, his movements sharp and impatient. The man in front of her was 35, confident and increasingly convinced the world owed him something. His reflection mattered more to him than the room behind him. "Did you see my cufflinks?" he asked without turning around. "They're in the top drawer, left side," Evelyn replied calmly. Mark found them exactly where she said they were. He always did. Evelyn remembered things so he didn't have to. Years earlier, when she met Mark, he had been charming in a focused, determined way. He worked in mid-level finance at a development firm, talked about building something big, about success, about never being small again. Evelyn admired his drive. She admired how certain he was of himself, how he made decisions quickly, without doubt. He admired something else in her quiet. "You don't argue," he had said on their third date, almost with relief. "You listen." Evelyn had smiled then. She thought listening was love. From the beginning, she supported him in ways no one ever saw. When Mark stayed late at work, she waited. When his mood shifted, she adjusted. When he said stress made him sharp, she believed him. When people warned her about his temper, she defended him. He doesn't mean it, she would say. He just wants to do well. She believed loyalty could soften anyone. When the twins were born, Evelyn stepped back from her own career without complaint. She had been offered a promotion, one that would have meant travel, recognition, independence. A regional coordinator role, she declined it quietly. Stability matters more right now, she told herself. Mark never asked what she gave up. He assumed she hadn't lost anything important. Over time, his admiration for her humility slowly turned into expectation. He controlled the household finances not with threats or raised hands, but with indifference. He set up the accounts in his name for simplicity. He decided what made sense, what was necessary, what was extra. Evelyn never fought him on it. She trusted him. Mark, on the other hand, didn't trust money unless it was under his control. He often mocked wealthy people during dinner, called them parasites, said they were born lucky and thought they were better than everyone else. Real work isn't inherited, he'd say, shaking his head. You earn respect. The rest is just numbers on a screen. Once, half joking, half serious, he looked at Evelyn and said, If you had real money, I'd know. I see everything. She laughed then. The idea felt ridiculous. Her world had always been small and carefully managed. She didn't crave more. She didn't dream of power. She dreamed of peace, of raising her children gently, of keeping promises. She believed marriage was about endurance. That belief kept her quiet longer than it should have. On this particular morning, Mark moved past her toward the door, phone already in hand. The twins watched him with wide eyes. Noah stepped forward. Dad, are you coming to my school thing today? Mark paused, then checked his watch. We'll see, he said quickly. I've got meetings. Big ones. Evelyn placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. It's okay, she said softly. Mark slipped on his shoes. As he reached for the door, he stopped and turned back toward her. His expression changed, not angry, but calculating. Oh, one more thing, he said. Evelyn looked up. I'm in charge of the firm's Christmas event this year, Mark continued. Not just the usual office thing. We're hosting some clients and sponsors, important people Sienna brought in. I've been working on this for weeks, he went on, straightening his jacket. Told everyone at the office it's going to be the event of the year. He said the name casually, as if it had come up 100 times. You'll be there, he added. Of course. Evelyn nodded. Mark's tone hardened just a fraction. Enough to notice. It's important you don't embarrass me. The words landed heavier than they sounded. Not a request. A warning. Evelyn didn't ask what he meant. She didn't ask what he was worried about. She simply said, I won't. Mark seemed satisfied. He opened the door and left, already distracted by his phone. Evelyn stood still long after he was gone. The twins looked up at her, sensing the shift in the air. She forced a smile for them. She always did. But as she gathered their coats and bags, a quiet thought settled in her chest, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. For the first time, she wondered who the party was really for, and why he sounded afraid. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones already preparing for you to stand in the wrong place. The first thing Evelyn noticed was the sound of heels. Sharp, confident, familiar in a way that didn't belong inside her home. She was standing at the kitchen counter, helping Lily with a homework worksheet, when the front door opened. The lock turned, metal against metal. Noah looked up first, his pencil pausing midair. Dad's here, he said. But it wasn't Mark's voice that reached them first. Your place is always warmer than I expect, a woman said lightly, as if she had said it many times before. Evelyn frowned. She glanced at the phone on the counter and saw a message she hadn't heard arrive while she was reading with the twins, bringing a colleague by. Need to grab a file. She turned. The woman who stepped inside moved like she already knew where everything was. She was in her early 30s, polished and stylish, without trying too hard. Her hair fell perfectly over one shoulder. Her coat was expensive but worn casually, as if she didn't need to prove anything. Mark followed behind her, keys in hand, already checking his phone. He had clearly opened the door and let her go first. Oh, Evelyn, he said, sounding more surprised to see his wife than the woman he'd brought. This is Sienna Blake. Sienna smiled immediately. Wide, friendly, confident, too confident. It's so nice to finally meet you, Sienna said, stepping forward and offering her hand. Mark's mentioned you. Evelyn hesitated only a second before shaking it. Sienna's grip was firm, familiar. And these must be the twins, Sienna added, crouching slightly. Hi, sweeties. Evelyn stiffened. She hadn't invited her to use that word. Noah glanced back at his mother. Lily smiled politely, the way Evelyn had taught her. Nice to meet you, Evelyn said carefully. Sienna straightened and walked past her, heading toward the kitchen without asking. She opened the correct cabinet on the first try and pulled out a glass, then paused. Mark, do you still keep the good ice on the top shelf, or did you finally move it? She asked casually. Mark didn't look up. Top shelf. Same place, he said. Sienna reached for it with ease. Evelyn watched, her mind quietly cataloging details. Sienna knew where things were. She knew about the good ice, an inside joke Evelyn hadn't heard Mark make in years. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait to be offered anything. She belonged here at least. She acted like she did. Mark finally looked up and smiled. You didn't have to come by today, he said. Sienna waved a hand. I was nearby anyway. And you forgot your folder at the office again. She handed him a slim leather case. Mark exhaled in relief. Right. The sponsor files. I don't know what I'd do without you. The words were casual. The way he said them wasn't. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest, slow and cold. They moved around each other easily. Too easily. Sienna leaned against the counter while Mark spoke, finishing his thoughts without thinking. We'll need to move the presentation up, Mark said. By at least a week, Sienna added smoothly. The foundation board won't want to wait until after the holidays. Mark nodded. Exactly. Foundation board. Sponsors. Words Evelyn hadn't heard much about before Sienna appeared. Evelyn stood quietly, her hands folded. She told herself she was imagining it, that this was normal, that this was work. Sienna turned to her again, eyes bright with interest. So, she said pleasantly, how long have you two been married? The question was innocent, curious, almost friendly. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer. We should get going. Mark cut in quickly, glancing at his watch. Traffic's going to be bad, and Sienna has another meeting. Sienna raised an eyebrow but smiled. Right, of course. Evelyn noticed how Mark avoided her gaze. Sienna slipped on her coat, then paused near the door. She turned back toward Evelyn. Oh, she said lightly. I'll see you at the party. Evelyn blinked. The party? Mark stiffened. Sienna tilted her head, confused. The Christmas event. Mark said it was all set. Our sponsors and the foundation board love these things. Evelyn looked at her husband. He didn't look back. It's just a work thing, he said quickly. I probably forgot to mention, it's fine, Evelyn said, her voice calm. Too calm. Sienna's smile widened. Great. It'll be fun. These people love to see who's behind the scenes. She waved at the twins. Bye, sweeties. The door closed behind her. The house felt different immediately, quieter, heavier. Mark cleared his throat. She's helpful, he said. Very organized, knows people. Evelyn nodded. She seems comfortable. Mark frowned slightly. She's just confident. Evelyn didn't argue. She never did. That night, long after the twins were asleep, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Mark had gone to bed earlier, saying he was tired. His phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. He picked it up and stepped into the hallway. Evelyn didn't mean to listen. She just couldn't sleep. Mark's voice was low, urgent. She noticed. He said. A pause. No, not everything, he continued. She doesn't need to know everything. It's fine. Just be careful. Silence stretched. I'll handle it. He ended the call and stood still for a moment before returning to bed. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt excluded. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet warning took shape. Some smiles don't arrive to introduce themselves. They arrive to replace you. The phone rang again at exactly 11:47 p.m. This time, Evelyn didn't silence it. She sat upright in bed, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the soft hum of the house. Mark was asleep beside her, turned away, his back a wall she had learned not to knock on. The twins were down the hall, breathing evenly, unaware that the night was about to split their mother's life into a before and an after. The screen glowed. Unknown number. Evelyn stared at it, then noticed the tiny red badge she had ignored all day. One missed voicemail. Same number. She slipped out of bed, bare feet silent against the floor, and stepped into the hallway before pressing play. Miss Evelyn Carter, a calm male voice said, measured and professional. My name is Daniel Rowe. I'm an attorney calling regarding a confidential estate matter. I'm sorry to contact you at an inconvenient time, but I believe I represent someone connected to you. It's important we speak. Please return this call at your earliest convenience. That was it. No details, no drama, just controlled urgency. Evelyn's heart beat faster anyway. Estate. Connected to you. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. If anything ever happens, answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. The right people won't say too much on a message. Before she could talk herself out of it, she pressed the number and called back. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. Daniel Rowe speaking. This is Evelyn, she said. Evelyn Carter, you called me earlier. His tone shifted immediately, the way professionals sounded when something important finally landed where it was supposed to. Miss Carter. Thank you for returning my call, he said. I'll keep this brief for now, and we can arrange a proper meeting later. Evelyn leaned against the hallway wall. Okay. I regret to inform you, Daniel began, that your biological father passed away 3 weeks ago. The words landed without sound, like snow falling into deep water. My biological father? She repeated. Yes, Daniel said carefully. Your mother consented to a confidential paternity test when you were in college. The sample was collected privately, processed through an independent lab, and the results were sealed at the client's request. Confirmation has been in place for years. It was legally restricted until his death. You were never informed, he added. That was a condition he insisted on. You were meant to live your life unaware, until it was safe for you to know. Her thoughts raced backward, years of unanswered questions, her mother's careful silence, the envelopes that arrived once a year and disappeared just as quietly. The man across the street at graduation. There is no ambiguity, Daniel continued. You are listed as his sole biological heir. Evelyn's chest tightened. Sole meant alone, no siblings, no one else. He lived a very private life, Daniel said. Publicly, he appeared as an investor in several large companies and foundations. Privately, his holdings were extensive. He paused, choosing his words. You'll see numbers in the news eventually. People will exaggerate. What matters legally is that his estate has been placed in an irrevocable trust, and you've been shielded from it until now for your safety. Evelyn swallowed. My mother knew? Yes, he said. She agreed to his conditions on one term: that you would never be abandoned. He provided financial support anonymously. She protected your day-to-day life. The envelopes, the stable rent, the way her mother never panicked, even when work was slow. It clicked into place with painful clarity. Why didn't he? She stopped. There were too many ends to that sentence. Daniel spoke gently. He believed exposure would put pressure on you, make people approach you for what you had, not who you were. He watched from a distance, Miss Carter. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Evelyn pressed a hand to her necklace, the familiar weight suddenly heavier. What happens now? She asked. The trust activates fully, Daniel said. We'll need to verify your identity in person, walk you through documents, answer questions. For the moment, your name is sealed. Nothing has been filed publicly that links you to him. You have time to decide how visible you want to be. Evelyn stared down the dark hallway toward the twins' room. Time. Privacy. Two things she suddenly understood were worth more than money. Daniel hesitated, then continued. There is one more thing, he said, and I apologize if this feels intrusive. Part of our work has been monitoring potential risk factors in your environment, people who might try to use you if they knew who you are. Ice slid down her spine. What do you mean? We're aware your husband's firm is co-hosting a holiday event with one of the foundations your father quietly funded, Daniel said. Several of us will be attending in our professional capacities. Our names are on the guest list as representatives of the trust and related entities. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone. You know about my husband's party? She said slowly. We know about the event, he corrected. We didn't choose it. It was set before your father passed. Your husband's company has been trying to move closer to certain donors. Miss Blake Sienna leveraged prior connections to secure invitations. She doesn't know the full extent of who she's dealing with. Sienna, sponsors, foundation board. The puzzle she hadn't understood earlier shifted into a different picture. If you attend, Daniel added, you may see my name Daniel Rowe and my colleague Laura Kim on the printed list. That's not a coincidence. We won't approach you publicly unless you invite it. For now, I just needed you to know your life is already intersecting with this estate, whether anyone in your home realizes it or not. Evelyn's breath shook once. She forced it steady. Okay, she said quietly. I need time. Of course, he replied. We'll send you a secure email with proposed times to meet, away from your husband and his colleagues. No decisions tonight, just information. Thank you, she whispered. Miss Carter, Daniel said softly before ending the call. You've been living as if you have nothing protecting you. That's no longer the case. Please don't share this with anyone you don't fully trust yet. Not until we've spoken again. She ended the call and stood in the dark hallway, the phone pressed to her chest as if it could anchor her to the floor. Her father was dead. Her life, everything she thought she understood, had been shaped by a decision made long before she had any say. And someone, somewhere, had already connected the dots she was only just beginning to see. She walked slowly into the kitchen and sat at the table. The gold necklace around her neck felt heavier than ever, no longer just a memory but a marker. Proof. She remembered her mother's voice again, clearer now. If anything ever happens, answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. It had happened. All of it had already happened. From the hallway, she heard Mark stir in his sleep. A reminder that the life she lived now, the marriage she had trusted, was standing directly in the path of something much larger. The party, the foundation, the woman who smiled too comfortably. Evelyn looked down at her phone again. The unknown number no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a door. She wasn't ready to step through it yet, but for the first time in her life, she understood something with perfect clarity. This wasn't arriving late. It was arriving exactly when it needed to. And whatever waited for her at that Christmas party wasn't coincidence. It was a room her father's shadow had already walked into. Some truths don't explode when they arrive. They sit quietly waiting for the right room to walk into. The moment Evelyn stepped inside, she knew she shouldn't have come. The room was loud with laughter and polished voices, filled with people who looked like they belonged everywhere they stood. Soft lights reflected off glass and decorations, but the warmth was artificial, carefully arranged. Evelyn felt it immediately, an invisible pressure, like she had entered a space that had already decided she didn't fit. She tightened her grip on her twin's hands. Noah stayed close to her side, quiet and alert. Lily clutched her small purse with both hands, eyes wide as she took in the room. Evelyn bent slightly, her voice low and steady. Stay with me, she said. No matter what. They nodded. Mark walked a few steps ahead of them, confident, smiling, already greeting guests. He didn't look back to see if they were following. He didn't need to. In his mind, they were background. Evelyn slowed her steps, observing everything. She noticed how conversations paused when she passed. How eyes flicked to her coat, simple, clean, clearly not chosen for display. She noticed the subtle shift in posture when people realized she was Mark's wife, not a client, not a donor. Near the main table, a stack of printed programs and guest lists sat neatly arranged for attendees. As they walked in, a staff member handed one to Mark, and by habit, one to Evelyn. She accepted it without thinking, folding it over her fingers. Then she saw Sienna. Sienna Blake sat beside Mark as if the seat had always been hers. Her dress was elegant, fitted perfectly, designed to draw attention without asking for it. She leaned close to Mark, laughing softly at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The chair next to them where a spouse usually sat was empty, a handbag hanging off the back as if claiming it for someone more important. Evelyn stopped. This time, there was no confusion, no benefit of doubt. Sienna looked up and noticed her. Their eyes met. Sienna smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was satisfied. Oh, Sienna said brightly, standing halfway. You made it, Evelyn nodded. We were invited. Sienna's smile widened just enough to sting. Of course. Her gaze slid slowly down Evelyn's simple coat and understated dress. You really committed to the no-frills look, huh? Sienna said lightly. Bold choice for tonight. Mark finally turned. His expression flickered surprise at seeing the twins in their good coats, then irritation, then control. There you are, he said, as if Evelyn had arrived late to something she already owed him. "You can stand over there for now." He gestured vaguely toward the edge of the room. Evelyn looked at the empty chair near him, then back at Mark. "I thought, it's reserved," Sienna cut in smoothly, "for sponsors and board members. Seating is delicate tonight." She sat back down, crossing her legs, her hand still on Mark's arm. Evelyn said nothing. She guided the twins toward the side of the room, her posture straight, her face unreadable. She felt dozens of eyes on her now, watching, measuring. A server approached with a tray. Sienna waved him over. "Actually, could you move the children away from here?" she said lightly. "They're kind of in the way of the service path." The words were polite on the surface, sharp underneath. The server hesitated and glanced at Evelyn. Mark didn't intervene. He didn't say, "They're fine." He didn't say, "They're my kids." He said nothing. Evelyn felt Lily's fingers tighten around hers. "It's okay," Evelyn said softly to the server. "We'll move." She led her children farther back, closer to a wall where the music sounded duller and the conversations faded into background noise. There were no chairs. They stood. Minutes passed, then more. Evelyn shifted her weight slightly, careful not to show discomfort. Lily's feet began to ache. Noah leaned into her leg. Evelyn scanned the room. She saw people notice. She saw them look away. A few frowned, uneasy. No one spoke. Sienna laughed loudly from across the room, then raised her glass, tapping it gently to draw attention. The room quieted. "I just want to say something," Sienna said, smiling warmly, as if she were doing everyone a favor. "Tonight is about celebration, about belonging, about knowing where you fit." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Evelyn and the twins by the wall. "Some people," Sienna continued, lifting her glass higher, "don't belong everywhere they're invited." A few guests laughed awkwardly. Others shifted uncomfortably. One woman looked down at the floor. Mark stood beside her. He didn't stop her. He didn't correct her. He didn't look at his children. Something inside Evelyn finally went still. Not broken, not angry, focused. The same staff member from the entrance passed by, placing another stack of printed programs on a small side table near where she stood. Evelyn reached for one without thinking, her fingers brushing the thick paper. A guest list. She lowered her eyes, skimming it absently until one name stopped her breath. Daniel Rowe. The letters blurred for a second, then sharpened. The voice from the late-night call now had a place in the room. Her heartbeat slowed. The room seemed to pull away, sound fading, faces blurring. That name wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. She read it again. Then once more, noticing the line beneath it, Laura Kim, the trust administration contact Daniel had mentioned in passing, and other names she recognized from the firms and foundations he'd referenced. Her grip tightened slightly on the paper. When she lifted her gaze, she saw him. Across the room, a man stood quietly, watching her, not Mark, not Sienna, but someone else, older, composed, in a well-cut suit that didn't shout wealth but whispered precision, Daniel Rowe. His expression wasn't judgmental. It was assessing, almost respectful. Evelyn's face didn't change. No anger, no fear, only calculation. She folded the guest list carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. She looked down at her children and smiled gently. "Stay right here," she whispered. "I'll be back in just a minute. I'll be close enough for you to see me." They nodded, trusting her without question. As she stepped forward, the lights above seemed harsher, the air colder. Mark noticed her movement and frowned, sensing something shift but not understanding what. Sienna watched too, her smile faltering just a little. Evelyn walked calmly, no rush, no hesitation, toward the center of the room, toward the man whose name had been living quietly inside her voicemail. Because now, she knew something they didn't. This room wasn't built on Mark's power. It was built on her father's shadow. And whatever was about to happen next wouldn't be loud. It would be precise. Some moments don't ask for courage. They reveal it. She didn't get far. "Mom," Lily whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Don't go too far." Evelyn glanced back. The twins' faces were small and serious in the crowd. She couldn't leave them alone in a room where they'd already been treated like an inconvenience, so she returned to the wall. Her heart was still pounding, but the humiliation had sharpened into something else entirely. Focus. She unfolded the program and guest list again, smoothing the thick paper with steady fingers. Around her, The party continued, glasses clinking, soft music playing, laughter rising and falling in waves. To everyone else, this was a celebration. To Evelyn, it had become evidence. Names, titles, affiliations. She read slowly this time, not just looking for the one name she already knew. Daniel Rowe, Senior Estate Counsel. Laura Kim, Trust Administration. Her chest rose and fell carefully. The call in the dark hallway hadn't been a dream. These weren't random professionals at a corporate party. Below that, Jonathan Hale, Financial Compliance Auditor. Elena Locke, Chair, Locke Family Philanthropic Foundation. The foundation name matched the ones Daniel had mentioned. Quiet donors, long-term partners. Her father's circles. Evelyn's mind raced. These were not Mark's people. Mark's world was smaller, louder, hungrier. He chased investors, yes, but these names belonged to a different circle. A quieter one. A circle that didn't attend parties for networking or ego. They attended when something was being observed. She glanced up. Across the room, Daniel Rowe stood near a tall cocktail table. Posture calm, eyes moving deliberately. Not scanning the room randomly but locating someone. Her. Nearby, Laura Kim spoke softly with another guest. Her attention focused, her expression neutral but alert. Jonathan Hale, the compliance auditor, stood in conversation with Marianne Locke, the foundation chair, both of them occasionally glancing at the main sponsor table where Mark and Sienna sat. None of them were watching Mark with admiration. They were watching the event, watching behavior, watching her. A chill slid down her spine, not fear, but recognition. This wasn't coincidence. She remembered Mark boasting weeks earlier about the guest list, about how Sienna had helped him reach higher. She knows people, he had said dismissively, the right kind. Evelyn understood now. Mark hadn't invited power. Power had followed her. She shifted slightly, her gaze moving to Sienna. Sienna stood confidently beside Mark, laughing too loudly, basking in attention she believed she had earned. Her confidence rested on a lie she didn't even know she was telling. Sienna had promised connections. Mark had believed her. Neither of them had realized who the connection really was. Evelyn exhaled slowly. This party wasn't Mark's showcase. It was her father's shadow arriving early. The thought settled heavily, but it didn't crush her. It steadied her. She remembered the envelopes, the silence, the distance, the protection disguised as absence. Her father hadn't stepped into her life, but he had never stopped watching it. And now, even in death, the safeguards he put in place were still working. Evelyn felt eyes on her again. This time, she didn't look away. Daniel Rowe turned fully toward her. Their gazes met, and for the first time that night, she gave a tiny nod, permission, not panic. He nodded back once, subtle, respectful. Her pulse quickened not with panic, but with resolve. At the main table, Mark finally picked up one of the printed programs he'd been ignoring all night and flipped to the guest list, half distracted. His eyes skimmed lazily until they caught on a cluster of names he recognized from office whispers. Daniel Rowe, Senior Estate Counsel. Laura Kim, Trust Administration. Locke Family Philanthropic Foundation. His stomach tightened. Those were the people his bosses bragged about in meetings, the kind who could reshape a firm's future with one decision. Mark noticed the shift. He followed her line of sight and frowned. His smile faltered as he watched the exchange, unease creeping into his expression. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. "Who's that?" he muttered to Sienna, nodding toward Daniel. Sienna glanced over, her brow furrowing. "I don't know," she said quickly. "Probably someone important from the foundation." Mark's jaw tightened. Important to who? Evelyn folded the guest list again, carefully, as if the paper itself held weight. She placed it back into her coat pocket and straightened her shoulders. Her twins watched her, sensing the change. Lily reached for her hand. Evelyn squeezed it gently. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Stay right here where you can see me." A moment later, someone approached. It was Daniel Rowe. He moved quietly, deliberately, stopping just far enough to be respectful. His voice was low when he spoke. "Miss Carter," he said softly, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" The words cut through the noise like a blade. Mark turned sharply. "Excuse me?" he said, stepping forward. "Is there something you need?" Daniel glanced at him briefly, just long enough to acknowledge his presence. Yes, Daniel replied evenly, but not from you. Mark stiffened. Daniel's eyes returned to Evelyn. There was no pity there, no surprise, only confirmation that she was exactly who he thought she was. It won't take long, he added, and it concerns matters we discussed on the phone. The room seemed to tilt. A few nearby guests, hearing the word phone, glanced over with quiet curiosity. Evelyn didn't look at Mark. She didn't look at Sienna. She looked at her children once more, then back at Daniel. Of course, she said calmly. If we can stand where my children can still see me. Of course, he echoed. Just over there. He gestured toward a quiet corner a few steps away, still within the twins' line of sight, but far enough from the main crowd to be out of earshot. Mark's confidence cracked not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to be noticed. His smile vanished, his posture tightened. Evelyn, he said, a warning edge creeping into his voice. We're in the middle of something. She turned to him then, her expression unreadable. So am I, she said. I'll be right back. Daniel waited, giving her space to decide. When she stepped toward him, she did it without hesitation. As Evelyn followed him, she felt something shift behind her, whispers starting, eyes tracking, curiosity rising. Daniel didn't launch into explanations. In the quiet corner, he simply reintroduced himself, confirmed that everything he had told her on the phone was real, and asked if she was safe at home. He suggested a meeting away from the party, away from her husband, to go over details. We'll contact you with a secure time and place, he said softly. This is not the room where you need to carry this alone. She nodded once. I understand. They parted after less than 2 minutes. No raised voices, no drama. Just a new trajectory. Evelyn walked back to her children with her shoulders a fraction straighter. She didn't know exactly what would come next, but she knew this much with absolute certainty. The night Mark planned to humiliate her had just become the night everything began to turn. Some names don't belong on a list by accident. They arrive when a story is ready to be corrected. The first document hit the table like a quiet explosion. Evelyn didn't flinch, but the room did. It had been a little over a week since the Christmas party. In that time, she had gone on making breakfasts, packing lunches, folding small clothes, and answering carefully timed calls from numbers that no longer scared her. Now she sat in a small, neutral office with no decorations meant to impress. Just clean lines, soft light, and a sense of order that calmed the storm building beneath her ribs. Across from her sat Daniel Rowe, the estate attorney who had spoken to her at the party, measured, precise, careful with every word. To his right was Marianne Holt, a divorce attorney in her early 40s, known more for airtight preparation than courtroom theatrics. Near the window stood Evan Brooks, a private investigator with a posture that suggested patience was his sharpest tool. Beside Evelyn, silent and steady, sat Rachel, a longtime friend from before marriage, before compromise. The one person Evelyn had quietly called and asked, "Can you come with me?" Evan slid the first folder forward. "This is where it starts," he said. Inside were bank statements, clear, undeniable. Evelyn leaned in, eyes scanning numbers with a calm she didn't feel. Transfers she didn't recognize. Withdrawals timed carefully. Small amounts at first, then larger. All taken from shared accounts, routed through a company name she had never heard spoken out loud. "Mark has been diverting marital funds," Evan continued. "Not recklessly, intentionally." Evelyn exhaled slowly. She had expected pain. What she hadn't expected was clarity, Daniel added. These movements began shortly after he met Sienna Blake. Her name doesn't appear on the accounts directly, but the timing lines up with when she started consulting for your husband's firm and when his spending pattern changed. Another folder followed. Payroll records. Shell consulting fees. Invoices with vague descriptions and neat formatting. Sienna was placed on payroll through a consulting firm Mark created, Evan explained. Minimal documentation of actual services. Just a clean way to move money out of shared finances and, in some cases, to mischaracterize money tied to donations from the foundation. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. Evelyn didn't. She forced herself to look. "The foundation's compliance department flagged some of this before your father passed," Daniel said quietly. "They didn't know who you were yet. They knew only that someone at your husband's firm was too eager to leverage donor money and reputation." Weeks passed in careful increments. The investigation didn't rush because Evelyn didn't. She still took her children to school, still read bedtime stories, still lived quietly, Only now, every quiet moment was layered with purpose. More evidence surfaced. Text messages, preserved and verified. Mocking messages Mark sent to Sienna late at night. She doesn't know her place. She's nothing without me. I control everything. Some messages were worse, not in language, but in contempt. Talking about moving money where she'll never see it, about locking down the house if she ever got difficult. Evelyn read them once, then again, then placed the phone face down. I need the full picture, she said calmly. Marianne nodded. You'll have it, she replied, and we'll move only when you're ready, not before. Witness statements came next. Party guests who had noticed the humiliation, staff who had been instructed to move the children, a server who remembered Sienna's words clearly and that Mark had heard them and said nothing, a foundation representative who noted, in a formal report, that they were concerned by the host's disregard for his own family during a donor-facing event. Each statement signed, each account aligned. And then Daniel placed a single document in front of her. Trust documentation. At the top was a seal. Evelyn's breath caught not with shock, but recognition. The symbol engraved on the page matched the small, worn pendant resting against her collarbone. The simple gold necklace she had worn for years without knowing why it mattered. Her father's foundation seal. She touched the necklace instinctively. He wanted you identified without being exposed, Daniel said quietly. If anything happened to him before this all reached you, this symbol was his way of letting you know we were the right people. The room fell silent. Evelyn closed her eyes not to grieve, but to steady herself. Her life hadn't been small. It had been protected. More files followed. Draft documents Mark had prepared, post-nuptial agreements he'd never had the courage to present yet, designed to limit her rights if he ever did. Notes from meetings she was never told about, where he'd ask questions about shielding assets from a spouse who didn't understand money, a plan that depended entirely on her silence and trust. She felt something shift, not rage, not collapse. Resolve. Evan broke the silence gently. He doesn't know how much we've traced, he said. From the marriage accounts, from the business, and from the way he's tried to lean on foundation money. He thinks this is still under the radar. Evelyn met his eyes. He doesn't know we have enough to make people look at him the way they looked at me, she said quietly. The words hung in the air, not as a threat, but as fact. Marianne slid one last document across the table. A divorce petition, carefully prepared, thorough, unavoidable. We can file this when you're ready. We already have grounds, Marianne said. You don't need his permission to leave. Evelyn picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name once, then again where it was needed. With each stroke, something old loosened its grip on her chest. When she finished, she placed the pen down neatly. I won't make a scene, she said, but I won't disappear. Daniel nodded. That's wise. We're also initiating the necessary reports with the foundation and the firm's compliance officers. What happens next to his accounts won't be because of your new status. It'll be because of his choices. Evelyn stood, her posture composed, her voice steady. Next, she said, we tell the truth. As they gathered the files, Rachel reached for her hand and squeezed it once. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. But Evelyn knew better, because the quiet part was over. And soon, very soon, the people who had watched her stand in silence would hear her speak. Some endings aren't loud, they're signed and then revealed. The room went silent the moment Evelyn Carter stood. Not the uneasy quiet of a party losing its music, but the sharp, expectant silence of people realizing something irreversible was about to happen. The setting had changed completely from the Christmas gathering. This was a formal conference space arranged by the foundation's legal team and the firm's board, clean and bright, built for clarity, not comfort. Long tables, neutral walls. Rows of chairs filled with legal observers, internal compliance officers, select members of the foundation board, and a small cluster of financial journalists invited under strict ground rules. Everyone had been told they were there for a personal and financial clarification relating to donations and governance. Mark stood near the front, tense, jaw tight. He hadn't expected her. Not here. Not like this. He'd convinced himself this would be about misunderstandings he could talk his way out of. Sienna stood a few steps behind him, arms folded, posture still confident, but her eyes darted more than before. The earlier summons had mentioned questions about consulting arrangements. She'd told herself she could handle it. Evelyn took one steady breath. She looked different, not in clothes, not in makeup, but in presence. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't bracing. She stood straight, hands resting calmly on the table in front of her. No tears, no anger, only control. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she began, her voice clear and even. "Thank you for giving me a few minutes within this session." Mark shifted. "Evelyn, what is this?" he said sharply, trying to attach a strained smile to his words. "We can talk about this at home. This doesn't concern them." No one responded to him. Evelyn didn't look at him. "I'm making this statement to clarify several matters that have recently intersected," she continued. "Some personal, some legal, all factual. I'll be brief, and everything I reference is already documented with counsel." She nodded once to the side. Daniel Rowe, the estate attorney, remained seated among the other legal representatives. He did not speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Evelyn reached into her folder and removed the first document. "I am the sole biological heir to a private estate," she said. "The trust associated with that estate was activated recently following the death of my father. His identity was legally protected during his lifetime. That protection remained in place until I chose to lift part of it for the sake of transparency in these proceedings." A ripple moved through the room, not shock recognition. Several faces, especially on the foundation side, showed quiet confirmation. Mark laughed once, short and strained. This is ridiculous," he said. "She's exaggerating. You don't have to." No one laughed with him. Evelyn placed the document flat on the table and slid it toward the central legal representative. "The trust documentation has been independently verified," she said calmly. "I did not seek this money. I did not know it existed. But I will not deny it, and I will not allow my lack of knowledge to be used against me." She paused, not for effect, but for accuracy. "The relevance here is simple," she added. "I have no financial reason to fabricate what I'm about to say." She took out another set of papers. "Over the past several months," she continued, "marital funds were diverted from shared accounts without my consent. Some of those funds were moved through entities that also handled donated money connected to this foundation." Mark's face drained of color. "These funds were transferred through shell consulting fees," Evelyn said, her voice steady, "and placed on payroll under false or inflated services." She lifted a page. The primary recipient was Sienna Blake. Every head turned. Sienna's smile froze. Evelyn placed screenshots on the table, clear, organized, labeled. Bank transfers tied to dates, internal memos, text messages. A short summary Evan had prepared of the pattern, with footnotes referencing the attached documents. One by one, she slid witness affidavits forward. A server from the Christmas event, an event staff member, a guest, a foundation representative. Each page moved across the table with a soft, unmistakable sound. No music, no shouting, just paper. Mark reached for one document, hands shaking. "This is out of context," he said hoarsely. "You don't understand how business works. This is normal." Evelyn finally looked at him. "There is no context where hiding money from your family and misusing relationships with donors is acceptable," she said quietly. She turned back to the room. "I have filed for divorce," she said. "The petition has been submitted and served. I am not here to argue about my marriage. I am here so that the organizations my father trusted and the firm my husband works for are not misled about what has been happening behind closed doors." Mark opened his mouth again, desperation rising. "Evelyn, you're making a mistake," he said, louder now. "You don't understand what this will do to me, to us, to my career." She met his eyes fully this time. "I understand exactly what it does," she said. "It ends the lie." The silence deepened. Evelyn closed her folder. "My purpose here isn't revenge," she said. "It's truth. I will cooperate fully with all legal processes moving forward. The rest is in your hands." She stepped back. The statement was over. For a long moment, no one moved. Then whispers began, not chaotic but precise. Phones lowered as notes were taken. Compliance officers exchanged glances. Board members leaned toward their counsel. Mark stood alone, exposed. Every attempt to speak fell flat. No one asked him questions. No one defended him. Sienna took one small step backward, then another. She looked around the room, not at Evelyn, not at Mark, but at the exits. At the faces that no longer reflected admiration, only calculation. Her expression changed not to guilt, not to regret, to strategy. Evelyn watched her quietly, because she knew this wasn't the end. It was the moment before the fallout. Some people don't fall when the truth arrives. They step away hoping no one notices how fast they're leaving. Mark Carter woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing like an alarm that would not stop. Not one call many. He sat up fast, heart racing, thumb sliding across the screen as names flashed past. Accounts, numbers, alerts. Each notification carried the same quiet threat: access restricted. Review required, pending investigation. He swung his legs out of bed, breath short, and refreshed his email. The messages multiplied instead of disappearing. Account activity flagged for review. Temporary hold pending internal audit. Donor-funded projects under formal examination. His assets weren't gone, but they were no longer his to move freely. Credit lines frozen. Business cards declined. Certain accounts temporarily unavailable pending clarification. Mark stood there in the half-light, trying to understand how it had happened so fast. He had always believed power gave you time, warnings. A chance to fix things quietly before anyone important noticed. He grabbed his phone and dialed Sienna, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. Across town, Sienna Blake was already gone. She sat in the back of a rideshare, sunglasses on despite the cloudy morning, scrolling through her phone with calm precision. Her finger hovered over shared photos, smiling dinners, staged moments, carefully angled selfies that proved proximity to someone she thought would matter longer. She deleted them all, one by one. She had already sent a formal statement through her attorney that morning. Brief, clean, careful. She denied knowledge of financial wrongdoing, claimed she had been misled about the nature of the consulting work, positioned herself as a contractor who trusted the wrong person. She did not mention Mark's name more than necessary. Sienna believed in survival, not loyalty. Before noon, she updated her professional profile, removed any reference to Mark's firm, and sent a message to a new contact, someone with resources, influence, and no connection to what was unfolding. A potential client who had only seen her polished side and knew nothing about Christmas parties or donor audits. She never looked back. Mark left message after message. Sienna, pick up. We need to talk. This isn't what it looks like. She never responded. By afternoon, the calls stopped going through. At his office, doors that once opened easily now stayed shut. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Meetings were canceled with vague explanations. Invitations quietly disappeared from his calendar. Former allies became busy, very busy. Compliance had questions, now formal ones. They weren't interested in excuses. They were interested in signatures, authorizations, and why consulting fees connected to donor-related accounts looked so much like personal withdrawals. Mark tried to explain himself, but explanations require listeners, and no one wanted to be seen listening to him anymore. Not while the Foundation's auditors were walking the same halls. He watched his reputation collapse in real time. People he had mocked as parasites now controlled the narrative. By evening, legal notices arrived. Requests for records, notices regarding joint assets, letters from Marion Holt's office confirming timelines and expectations. Nothing screaming, nothing dramatic, just structured consequences, one envelope at a time. Mark sat alone at his kitchen table, the same place where Evelyn once sorted school papers and gently reminded the twins to say thank you twice. The house felt empty. He picked up his phone again and stared at Evelyn's name. He called. Once, twice, straight to voicemail. He left a message he never thought he'd need to leave. Evelyn, please, just talk to me. We can fix this. I didn't think it would go this far. He waited. Nothing. Outside, his phone buzzed with another alert, another account restricted, another door closing. He finally understood what silence felt like from the other side. The next morning, he opened his email to find more messages, this time from people cutting ties politely. Wishing you the best. Given the circumstances, at this time we must distance ourselves. Distance. That word followed him everywhere now. Across town, Sienna was already having coffee with someone new, laughing softly, adjusting her posture to fit a different room. She had learned early how to read spaces, how to leave before the floor collapsed. She did not feel guilty. She felt relieved. Mark, on the other hand, felt something heavier than fear. Regret. He sat in the quiet house, staring at the wall, replaying every moment he had dismissed Evelyn's silence as weakness. Every time he had mistaken her restraint for lack of power. He remembered the way she stood at the party, calm, still, watching. He hadn't understood it then. Now he did. He hadn't lost her because she was weak. He had lost her because he underestimated her, and because, when people who actually had power walked into the room, they had looked at her instead of him. That truth settled in slowly, painfully, with no one left to argue against it. As night fell, Mark's phone finally went still. No more alerts, no more calls. Just quiet. And somewhere beyond that quiet, Evelyn was moving forward, untouched by the wreckage behind her. He sat there, alone, realizing the worst part wasn't losing opportunities or accounts. It was knowing he had never truly known the woman who walked away with all the power he failed to see. Some collapses don't make noise. They leave you alone long enough to hear your own mistakes. The final judgment was read in a room so quiet it felt unreal. Months had passed since the Christmas party. Months of filings, responses, negotiations. Months of sudden headlines and then quieter corrections. Months where Evelyn chose, again and again, not to answer questions she didn't owe anyone. Now, at last, she stood still as the words settled. The dissolution is granted, the judge said. Terms as agreed. Across the table, her divorce attorney, Marian Holt, precise and composed, closed a folder with a soft, final sound. There was no dramatic reaction. No visible relief. No tears. Just an ending. Evelyn nodded once. That single movement carried years of restraint, endurance, and choice. She did not look back toward the side of the room where Mark sat with his own counsel. She did not ask questions she no longer needed answered. She simply accepted what she had already earned. Outside the building, the air felt different, lighter. The sky looked the same, but Evelyn felt as if something heavy had been set down and left behind. The twins waited on the steps with Rachel. Noah standing tall in his small coat, Lily clutching her mother's hand with quiet certainty as soon as she reached them. Is it over? Lily asked softly. Evelyn knelt to their level, her voice gentle and sure. Yes, she said. We're safe. That word mattered most. Safe. They walked away together, not rushed, not triumphant, but steady three figures moving forward without needing an audience. Weeks passed. The world tried to label her. Headlines hinted about the hidden heir and the quiet divorce behind the donation scandal. Whispers followed for a while. Evelyn did not chase them. She focused on what mattered. The twins returned to routines that felt normal again. School mornings were calm, evenings were quieter. Laughter returned in small, genuine bursts over spilled juice, crooked drawings, small victories. Protection had replaced tension. Evelyn met briefly with Daniel Rowe in a simple office overlooking a garden. He outlined options, numbers, structures, responsibilities, but never pressured her. This estate supported several causes your father cared deeply about, Daniel said. Education, child welfare, quiet work in places that don't attract cameras. Evelyn listened carefully. I'll continue them, she said. But on my terms. No announcements, no photo walls. Daniel smiled, respectful. That's exactly what he hoped you'd say. She kept her last name. Not as a statement, not as defiance, as truth. The name she had used to raise her children, to sign school forms, to survive long before anyone knew what sat behind it. Evelyn did not transform overnight. She didn't buy extravagance or seek attention. She invested thoughtfully. She asked questions. She learned. She built boundaries that did not bend under expectation or flattery. Power didn't change her. It revealed her. One afternoon, Evelyn stood in a modest office space. She had quietly funded an organization focused on supporting families during transitions, offering legal guidance and emotional stability. Some of the lawyers there had once worked on her case. Others came from places that reminded her of her mother's long workdays. There was no plaque with her name on it, just a small sign by the door that read, "Free consultations, no one decides for you." She sat across from a young mother and listened. That was how she honored the legacy, by staying herself. At home, the twins drew pictures at the kitchen table. Noah sketched a house with 3 stick figures holding hands. Lily added a sun in the corner, large and bright. Evelyn watched them from the doorway, her gold necklace resting against her collarbone. It no longer felt heavy. It felt complete. That night, after the children were asleep, Evelyn stood by the window and allowed herself one quiet moment of reflection. She thought of her mother, her strength, her silence, her careful love. She thought of a man who had loved from a distance and protected without presence, who had built systems instead of memories. And she thought of the woman she had been quiet, overlooked, underestimated. She hadn't been invisible. She had been choosing dignity, choosing patience, choosing the right moment to step forward. The next morning, Evelyn walked her children to school, her posture relaxed, her steps unhurried. No one stared. No one whispered. Whatever the world had thought about her had already moved on to other stories, and so had she. As they reached the corner, Noah looked up at her. "Mom? Yes? Are we okay now?" Evelyn smiled, not softly, not sadly, but with certainty. "We always were," she said. "We just didn't know it yet." They continued down the sidewalk together, framed by ordinary light and everyday sounds. Not rich in spectacle, not loud in victory, but unstoppable in silence. She didn't win because she inherited power. She won because she never lost herself. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment on the lessons you learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video.
Welcome to the Story Channel. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few notes. The content in this video uses AI-generated images and voice narration, combined with the channel's creative editing. Everything is intended solely for entertainment purposes and does not depict or reflect any real events or real people. Hope you enjoy the story and have a great time watching.